Wow. Today's video, more than anything, is a little bit of a rant and me just getting things off of my chest. I'm just feeling a lot of frustration at the moment and I want to put it out in some way. So hopefully this will achieve something in some way. If it educates just one person, then I am more than happy with that. But this is a topic that is just not spoken about and is so unseen by abled and disabled people that I think it's really important to talk about. I've always had that kind of fire in my belly and that want to achieve something that it's been really difficult over the years because my health does stop me from doing a lot of things. There is nothing my disability stops me from doing, and I know this is something that won't make sense to a lot of people, but for me, my disability and my illnesses are two completely different things. They rarely correlate together. Well, my illnesses have caused my disability, they're just not relatable to me personally. My health stops me from doing a lot of things, whether it be because my joints can't hack it, I'm in too much pain, I don't have the energy. There are a lot of things I cannot do because of my health, whereas there's nothing my disability stops me doing. There is nothing a disabled person cannot do. We just do it differently. Our disability does not stop us. The thing that stops us is living in an inaccessible world that is just built for disabled people not to thrive in. We're constantly having to fight inaccessibility and ableism. It's exhausting. Representation is a huge issue for disabled people. It just doesn't exist. This last week I've been focusing on representation, in particular in film and television, because this is a topic so many people just aren't educated on and just aren't seeing, but it's huge. There's so little representation in film and television for disabled people as a whole anyway. If you take just a minute to think about how many disabled characters you've seen in film and television, I can guarantee you there won't be many at all. And the most shocking part is, within those very few roles, less than 5% of them will be represented by a disabled actor. It doesn't matter how many times I say it, it still shocks me just as much every single time. Less than 5%. In the UK, the BBC are doing a pretty good job. I mean, compared to everybody else, they're doing a pretty good job. I remember being tiny and watching Ade Depperton on CBBC before I was disabled. I remember seeing that, and I think he was probably the only disabled person I'd seen on TV. I mean, that I can remember at least. CBBC have quite a few shows with disabled actors in, if I'm correct. For example, Hannah Monker in the show The Dumping Ground. ITV are doing alright as well. In Coronation Street we have the actress Sherry Houston, and in Emmerdale we have the actor James Moore. All of them are disabled actors playing disabled roles. That's what we want to see. However, in films, the representation just isn't there. Kevin McHale in Glee is an able-bodied actor playing a disabled character. Sam Claflin in Me Before You, Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot, Eddie Redmayne in The Rain Man, Charlie Heaton in The Elephant Man. Need I go on? I could give you a list as long as my arm. There are so many able-bodied actors playing the roles of disabled characters. Last week, Halle Berry came under a lot of scrutiny because she said she was considering taking the role of a transgender woman. While I don't agree with attacking anybody, I do agree that that isn't okay, that isn't acceptable. That role should have been given to a transgender actress. The actors aren't solely to blame here. They shouldn't be taking these roles and they should be recommending disabled actors. But more importantly, the casting directors need to do better too. They shouldn't be employing able-bodied people just for their names when there are disabled actors out there who are just as talented and who work just as hard, if not harder. Any ethnic or racial minority shouldn't be represented by somebody who isn't a part of that. I think that's pretty clear. So why are disabled people the exception? Do you really not care about disabled people that much? I posted a poll on Instagram and I asked, do you think it's acceptable for able-bodied actors to be playing the roles of disabled characters in film and television? 66% of people voted no. 34% said yes, and purely because I want to try and educate myself as much as I can, and I wanted to understand people's thoughts and opinions. I messaged the people who voted yes to ask them what their opinions were. As always, a few people did say they clicked yes by accident, they were just scrolling through. It happens. A few people did say they clicked yes because they were undecided. However, most of them just didn't see the issue. I responded by sending them a few basic facts and statistics, like less than 5% of disabled characters are played by disabled actors. It isn't that there aren't any disabled actors to play these roles, and it isn't that they don't have the ability to, it's that they're not being given the chance. So many disabled actors have spoken out about how difficult it is just to get into the audition room to be seen, let alone to then be chosen for the role. Some people said, well, sometimes the characters become disabled throughout the film, so I can use a disabled actor for that. Stunt doubles. And some people said, well, if they're representing us correctly and using this experience to do good and help us afterwards, what would be the issue? Well, the issue is that just isn't happening. Firstly, we're not being represented correctly, and they're not using these experiences to become an ally and to do good with that. One person that has is Jennifer Aniston. In 2014, she starred in the movie Cake, in which she played a chronic pain sufferer. She lived with somebody with chronic pain for months beforehand, studying their every move and every aspect of their life to understand how this affected them in every single way, to be able to represent and play that role to the best of her ability. She's gone on to use that experience to raise awareness. But representation and employing disabled actors is only half of the issue. The storylines of these films are a huge problem in themselves, and it shows how flawed the industry is, in the sense that not only are directors not employing disabled actors to represent these roles, but the roles they are writing go completely against the message that disabled people are trying to spread. Instead of using this opportunity to do good, to talk to disabled people, to give these disabled actors a voice and a chance, to use this storyline and this opportunity for a film to raise awareness, to do good, and to help disabled people, they're just making our life 20 times more difficult. Me before you. Any disabled person I know that has seen this film completely despises it. Yeah, me too. I remember watching the film not long after I'd become disabled. Maybe one of my biggest regrets. I remember sitting in tears for hours afterwards. Any little bit of confidence or acceptance I'd built, completely destroyed. I felt so worthless and unwanted, like my life just... what was the point? Nobody should feel that way. The lead role in this film, yet again, is a disabled role played by an able-bodied actor, Sam Claflin. In the film, Emilia Clarke is employed to be Sam's caregiver. His parents wanted her to come in to essentially show him that life is still worth living. He wanted to travel to Switzerland for euthanasia, and his family were completely against that. So throughout the film, it was just her trying to say, look, life's still great and worth living, even though you're disabled. In the end of the film, Sam's character travelled to Switzerland for euthanasia, and Emilia Clarke's character was left angry and upset. This film makes so many disabled people so angry for so many reasons. It just enforces this false message that our lives aren't worth living. This film makes disabled people angry for so many reasons. It portrays this false message that our lives are worthless, meaningless, and we have nothing to achieve. And it's easy for people to go, oh, that's not true. I've had several occasions where I've been out in public and people will come up to me, complete strangers that know nothing about me, and say, oh, I couldn't live like that if I were you. I'd kill myself if I were you. In what universe is that ever okay to say to anybody, let alone a complete stranger you know nothing about? Somebody that has no idea about disability or how it can affect somebody's life. What are you doing? There's a new film that has sparked this issue being brought up again. Come As You Are. It's a film about 3 disabled men, yet again, all played by able-bodied actors, who go on a road trip to a brothel for their first time. Because disabled people can't have sex, can they? Because nobody would want to be in a relationship with a disabled person. Disabled people are unattractive, undesirable, and could never have sex unless they pay for it, right? No. There are thousands of disabled people in happy, healthy, and sexually active relationships. Not that that's anybody's business, but even so, still abled people will either come up to disabled people in public or message them on social media, if not both, asking them if they can have sex. Yeah, that happens a lot. In what universe do you think that's okay? If you did that to any other person, oh, you'd be in serious trouble for it. But yet again, disabled people are the exception, aren't they? As if this film hasn't caused enough anger and upset as it is, the cast and director recently did an interview, and this has left me angry and upset to say the least. In the interview, they were asked, how do you approach the criticisms that will inevitably come about the fact that this film has able-bodied actors performing disabled roles? Here are a few things the cast and director had to say. At the end of the day, you've got to say, are we going to portray an amazing message with great actors who are actually prepared to take on this role, or are we going to spend years trying to cast somebody with a disability just because they have a disability? Then go on to completely contradict themselves by saying, to be clear, there are tremendous actors with disabilities. It wasn't even about that. We had 6 months to put the film together because we couldn't afford to pay for the option. So we had 6 months to find actors to play these roles who'd be willing to do it, get the financing in place and get it into production. I was told it couldn't happen, and it's true. If you're going to do something, do it right. There are some very, very talented disabled actors out there, and there are plenty of them. They're not difficult to find. So this excuse about not having time, I mean, I wouldn't have even bothered saying it, to be honest, because it's absolute crap. What makes you think it takes longer to find a disabled actor than an abled actor? I'm really confused here. Am I missing something? I was told it couldn't happen, and it's true. Can we just state, this director did not audition a single disabled actor. You didn't even try. So in what universe did you think it couldn't happen? But this is something that really hit me deep, and not in a good way at all. Richard Wong, the director of the film, said, a large part of what I connected to as a Chinese person is good representation and the awareness of the lack of representation. Growing up, I'll never forget the first time I saw a Chinese person on TV. I actually have a very vivid memory of it, and I remember being like, whoa, and feeling validated. In the interviews, every single person was extremely upset about portrayal and lack of portrayal and the misrepresentation of people with disabilities in media, and it stuck with me. It's something that all minority groups deal with, so I connected to it on that level. How can you say that? How can you sit there as somebody from a racial minority and say, do you know what? I remember the first time I saw me on TV. I remember feeling validated. I remember seeing correct representation. And literally taking that away from disabled people. You have to be seriously ignorant to say something like that and act that way. I remember the first time I really felt validated and represented. Growing up, I've always been a fan of Cheryl's. I think anybody that knows me knows that. In 2016, she was part of a L'Oreal campaign, and so was the YouTuber Jordan Boone. And I remember when she popped up on the screen, and I said, whoa, I said, that's me. I felt validated, I felt seen, I felt represented. How can you have that opportunity to have other people feel the way you do? Say you can relate to that and literally take it away from them. See, the thing about disability is, it's the only minority you could become a part of at any time in your life. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and be black. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and be transgender. But you could wake up tomorrow and be disabled. So could your parents, your brother, your sister, your child. 1 in 5 people in the UK have a disability. It affects everybody at some point in their life, whether it's personally or by a close relative or friend, whether it's temporary, you've had a broken leg for a few weeks, or it's permanent. It's gonna affect you too, one day. And that's why it confuses me so much that people don't want to fight for disabled people. They see inaccessibility and ableism and just don't care. Being disabled in this world is hard. Every single part of life is a challenge, not because of my disability, but because of the world I'm in. Because of society's bizarre thoughts about disability and the inaccessibility of the environment around me. It's hard enough for anybody growing up nowadays, having to accept yourself and try and find your way and your place in this world. And having to do it all while you're constantly being told that your life's worthless, you're a burden, you're in the way, and nobody really cares about you. It's hard. Accessibility isn't a ramp and a couple of rails in a toilet. It's acceptance, it's feeling welcomed. I can't be spontaneous. I can't just get up and decide I want to go out somewhere. I have to do so much research beforehand to make sure that the place that I want to go is accessible, that I can get in, that I can get around. They have disabled toilets, there's parking, there are no steps that don't have a ramp option. It's segregation, and when we find out somewhere isn't accessible, you might as well just put a big fat disabled people aren't welcome sign, because that's exactly how it feels. We're in 2020 and there isn't a single excuse anymore. Churches and castles that were built thousands of years ago have been made accessible. And I don't want to hear the excuses. Just because I get around in a chair on wheels does not warrant for me to be discriminated against and treated any differently. Every time I leave the house, I have to mentally prepare myself for the comments and questions I'm going to get about my personal life and my health every single time I go out, because I don't know what I'm going to deal with today. I don't know who I'm going to encounter and what they're going to say. We have to fight so hard for a basic quality of life. It makes you question whether you even deserve that. The constant comments and questions are exhausting. And when I've just come out of like a hospital appointment and I've decided I'm going to go to Tesco for 20 minutes just to have a bit of normality and a break and just to take my mind off things, I shouldn't then have to go and deal with complete strangers coming up to me and going, "What's wrong with you? What happened to you?" Nothing's wrong with me. Why is disability wrong? Why is disability bad? Because you don't know anything about it. The only thing that's wrong is your lack of education, empathy, and understanding for another human being. I still remember one of the first comments I got being out as a disabled person, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. I came home and cried for hours trying to understand why this complete stranger had said that to me, and I'm still just as baffled all these years later. Every time it happens, it shocks me just as much. I'm not the most confident person in the slightest, and I hate confrontation. So I'm not somebody that has the strength to... I'm not here to argue with anybody, I just want to educate people. Have the opinion you want, but at least be educated before you make it. And I wish I could do that and just educate people and make them realise that what you're saying, you don't see an issue with it, but it hurts. But every time it happens, it just completely takes me aback. And I still beat myself up for not saying anything and not doing anything, because what have they learned from that? Nothing, if anything, but it's okay to talk to people like that. And the thought that they would then go on to say that to somebody else, to a disabled child, to somebody who's new to disability, who hasn't got any confidence in themselves yet, who has maybe been through a really traumatic situation that's got them to that place, who couldn't handle those comments. What if I could have said something that could have changed their mind? What if I could have educated them and I didn't do that? Like that thought is difficult. And as exhausting as it is, I'm so lucky to have a voice and to be able to speak up about these things and to raise awareness. And I want to do that with every opportunity that I can while I'm in the middle of Tesco. No, I don't want to do that. I don't owe anybody an explanation, but nobody should ever have to feel the way I have and so many other disabled people have from people's questions and comments that are so hurtful and completely unnecessary. Thinking about the future generations of disabled people, I don't want anybody to have to feel like this, and that's why we need change. I might be one voice on my own, but I'm going to do everything I can with the voice and the power that I have to make change, to make sure nobody ever has to feel like this again.